Uncle Bildy here. I have a special treat for you. I'm going to have somebody ask me questions about Eurasianism. This is an experiment, but it'll be great. Trust me, it'll be great.
So tell me, what is it?
Eurasianism is an ideology that is opposed to globalism. I have notes. It's evolving. It is slowly and carefully being put together so that there is an input and a function and an appeal to many different cultures and nations who should be allies and allied against globalism, against what they call Atlanticism, what we know as New World Order, the Great Reset, the homogenizing and inventorying and control of every aspect of society. That's what it's opposed to. It's necessary. An ideology is necessary to have something to bring people together, to have a focus in against things.
Who's behind it?
Originally, Eurasianism was coined, the term was coined, and the original was described by the emigres during the Bolshevik Revolution. The people, they weren't really Mensheviks, they weren't really Tsarists, they weren't the whites, but they were appalled by Bolshevism. They had to flee Russia because of Bolshevism. They were theologians and philosophers. I never can remember their names except for Ilian, and I'm probably mispronouncing it, but there were several of them, and they were called the Eurasianists. Trubutsky, Savitsky, Florivsky, Vernadsky, Alexeyev, and Ilian. Ilian is often quoted and alluded to by Putin. I would describe Putin forensically, I mean looking at his policies and look at what he's been doing. He's a Eurasianist, he's on board with us. Anyway, these are the original Eurasianists. The Soviet Union was formed and they kind of disappeared. After the Soviet Union broke up, Alexander Dugin picked this up and has been developing on the ideas and building on the ideas ever since.
So how does it oppose globalism?
First, you got to describe globalism. I think everybody that watches this channel and all of us in the community and that gets it, there's lots of them. We know what they're doing. Globalism is the forced inventory and homogenization of all life, of all objects, of all energy on the planet. It's a group of people, the Klaus Schwab, New World Order, the Economic Forum, World Economic Forum.
Psycho Bill Gates.
Bill Gates, project managers. They're representing other people who obviously consider themselves to be the owners of the planet. And they plan to dispose of us any way they see fit. Something needs to oppose that. There are many people that oppose to it. It's not just mass populations. There's organizations taking place and forming to effectively oppose it. How does it oppose it is decentralization and codifying an ideology that respects indigenous populations and traditions. That's the key right there. We don't like having our traditions dismantled and being force-fed secularism, homosexualism, materialism. There's a lot of indigenous people. There's a lot of traditional cultures on this planet.
So right there you mentioned a couple isms, materialism, homosexual isms.
Mm-hmm.
Is the problem with isms because then isn't Eurasianism in that grouping?
Well, you have to admit that there's completely different things. You could how do you describe a word? Are Christians Christists, and this is Christianism, I mean, it's just putting ism on a word politicizes it, makes it a political theory. I'll put it this way. Americans don't like political theory. They don't like to hear the word ideology because they think they don't have one. They do have an ideology. An ideology is an existential way of looking at things. It's how you make your decisions. It's your value systems. Americans, I think, generally have the Bill of Rights as their codus of their ideology. And the Bill of Rights is compatible with Eurasianism. Is that Americanism?
But the
Not all
Americans,
isms are bad.
the Americans would actually have to know about the Bill of Rights,
Yeah.
which is a bad thing anymore. We don't want to teach that.
But I think this will help. It's compare and contrast.
Or actually teaching. Homeschooling would be a real boon to some of this stuff.
Well, the schools were foobarred, the public schools were foobarred by the globalists for their own reasons. I think you'd probably agree with that.
Yeah.
It's a
But it's
a
been
plan.
decades, and I mean, it's been slowly I'll shut up.
That's good. I like it's based on an ideology. The globalists have an ideology. And you have to have an ideology to oppose them. And knowing about the Bill of Rights, but not knowing what's in it, or having an AR-15 in your closet doesn't oppose them. You have to have an ideology that attracts people around which they can organize to oppose it on the ground, so you can defend your garden, so you can defend your traditions. And it's happening on a large scale with nations allying along a multipolar world, the BRICS countries. It's still shuffling, and all these countries, even Russia, have fifth columns. They have factions in there that are pro-globalism, that are vying for control. I think they've lost Russia and some other countries hands down. They don't have much of a chance of getting their hands on the levers anymore. I think it's solidifying on an international scale. How does that affect me? Well, that's it's what I'm here to try to describe.
Okay. So, for the average American, why would they support Eurasianism?
If they are against globalism, Eurasianism is an already made effective point to rally around. Well, you can rally around the Bill of Rights, and you're rallying around the same thing, really, except the Bill of Rights was not as descriptive as what needs to be for our time. It's really kind of vague when it comes right down to it, protecting you have to protect your local traditions economically, because they can bury you economically. Just having private property is not enough, because billionaires have more rights than you. They can buy your government, they can squeeze you out economically. There needs to be some controls on people with that much money. Oh, that's socialism. Protecting yourself from billionaires and corporations is not socialism. I suppose you could probably categorize socialism has certain political mechanisms that you could borrow, just like what you call capitalism has certain political mechanisms. You got to define your terms, and that's where it comes into play. Learning a few things about political philosophy. Not everybody's fascinated by that subject.
Well, I don't know why not.
It helps you define your terms and be able to describe what's going on and to understand what's going on. It is difficult, though.
For the originals that you named, why did they call it, or did they call it Eurasianism?
It's a good question. What they saw happening was the monarchical system was being overthrown worldwide. It was archaic. It didn't really work in the modern world with the technology that you had. They were not monarchists. Some of them were deeply Christian, theologians even, but they didn't believe in monarchy was viable. What were the alternatives at that time? The turn of the last century. This is during the Bolshevik Revolution. You had Bolsheviks, you had Mensheviks, which were basically liberals, Jeffersonian liberals. The Mensheviks wanted to make Russia into, like the United States, a representative, a democratic representative government, liberalism, private property, and all that. They were actually the majority, but they didn't control the media and the institutions. The Mensheviks, who were the small party, got to call the shots and name things. They named themselves Bolsheviks, which means big party, Bolshoi. They called their opposition Mensheviks, which means small party. In actuality, that was the opposite of the truth. But back to my philosophers, they were not Mensheviks. They didn't believe that liberalism was the ideal system either, because they saw it's going to develop into an oligarchy regardless. Being advocates of neither political theory, the main thing they saw is they were Western theories being imposed on Russia, and they saw and they insisted that Russia is not a Western society, and it's not an Eastern society. It is a society that was that evolved on its terrain and a geolocation. It evolved between Asia and Europe, and it evolved according to its own lights, neither being Western or Eastern or both, not both either. Something unique and of its own. That's Eurasianism. They say, we're Eurasians. We don't need the Western way. We don't need this liberalism. We don't need this Marxism. Marxism is a Western philosophy. It's not Eastern. Marx lived in London. He was, well, we all know what tribe he is from, but there's plenty of that in Russia too. That's another completely different subject, and I don't want to get banned from Facebook right now, but you can read works by Solzhenitsyn, his last book, which wasn't translated into English, but you can find it, 200 Years Together. It's fascinating about what was happening in the Pale of Settlement. That led directly to the Bolshevik Revolution. The Bolsheviks were aliens. They were not Russians. They did not consider themselves Russian. Anyway, the Eurasians.
But they had lovely tiny hats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Eurasianists consider themselves neither one or the other. They are Eurasia, not Europe, not Asia. That was where the name came from. Now this just fell off the edge of the planet after the Soviets were successful and took over. You could only have one party, and it's the Communist Party. They were exiled, or they left. They're called the emigres. After the Soviet Union fell, Alexander Dugin dug this stuff up, and there were...
How long ago did he dig that up?
The 90s, after the Soviet Union collapsed.
Okay.
And he said, this is gold. We're Eurasianist. We're Eurasians. We're not the West. And he saw what globalism, well, Fukuyama just wrote his book and said, it's the end of history. The West has triumphed. Everything is liberalism now. Jeffersonian liberalism, free market capitalism, conquered the world. It's all done now. Dugin didn't really buy into that, and a lot of people didn't, because they exploited Russia. Russia was looted in the 90s by the West. That's another subject. I've covered it before on some of my videos, but we'll stick with
basically,
Eurasianism.
how many countries haven't been looted by the West? I mean, really?
You're good. It's colonialism.
Can you name a handful of them?
I can't really think about that very long because I don't like dead air space on my videos. And I'd be here a while. I've seen it firsthand, but it is colonialism and looting. I mean, I was in Afghanistan for 4 years. I saw it firsthand. I never saw the strip mines, but I know a lot of people that did, and they didn't have any reason to lie to me. And now they're admitting to it. They're extracting the minerals and taking them out, not paying the Afghan people for them.
So it's government-sanctioned pillaging and plunder.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
That is, with Eurasianism, it's important that people have local control, because with Eurasianist ideology, a culture develops in a space, on a terrain. That's their space, that's their land. I know they shift around and people take land away from each other, but you have to make accommodations for that. We can't go back and sort things out anymore, but people on the land right now, including the minorities and including the different cultures within a nation, they have a right to their own resources. They have a right to develop as they see fit, and not be called savages and made to accept feminism, homosexuality, etc., and secularism, materialism, and called backwards if they don't. They have a right to develop on their own. And that's the core of Eurasianism. I have a primer here on it, and this is the problem I have, is getting materials for people to read, because this is all written by Russian political philosophers that wrote it in English as a second or third language.
So does Dugan only speak Russian?
Dugan speaks Russian, German, English, and Spanish, but I'm sure not all of them very well.
Oh.
His English is very passable, but his writing, he needs editors. His early stuff, his newer stuff's a lot better. They have a new version of this, and I'm going to get it, and I'm going to read it and make sure it's... this is gold. This has got some gold in it, but it's like mining for gold. You just have to move a lot of dirt to get to a little bit. It's a lot of work slogging through this, mainly because of the grammar and the terminology. I know American political philosophers that speak perfect English, and I have trouble understanding them because of their nomenclature and the way that they use verbs. They have a unique way of talking. They're theorists. They live in an academic aquarium. They're not normal people. Now you take that and compound it with a foreign language and have them writing books. It's very difficult. I want to be the translator. I want to bring this to the common man. But let me go back here and see. This is on the back cover. Against the establishment of the Atlantis world order. This is written in 2005. They were calling it Atlantis. It is an accurate description, the Atlantis. This stuff comes from England and America. The globalist technocratic oligarchy. They are against the establishment of the Atlantis world order, the new world order, and they're against globalization. They stand the supporters of the multipolar world. Many different poles of power. An Islamic pole, a Christian, Anglo pole, a Slavic pole, an African pole, an Eskimo pole. You know, everybody can have their own poles and be aligned in regions that can be balanced against each other.
I think the use of the word polar, multipolar, can have negative connotations when you connect it with bipolar. You don't necessarily see that as an enhancement in one's life, because there's ups, there's downs, there's ups, there's downs. So, speaking for myself, when I hear multipolar, I think then you're more fucked up instead of just two kinds of
like a schizophrenic.
Exactly.
Okay, that's where you're going.
Exactly.
With this. Yeah, I'm sure that's probably what a lot of people get out of it.
So they need to address that. I can't be the only one who looks at it like that.
Well, I've never thought of it at all. It's never occurred to me at
sorry.
all. Well, it's interesting. This is what I want. This is what I want to hear. But you're talking about a personality and a soul as opposed to a group of nations.
You know, and I get that completely. But when words are what's going to be used initially to get through to people, words can bring people to it or turn them away.
Indeed, that's where rhetoric comes in.
So what is the root definition of the word polar?
We're talking about points of political power. Instead of having economic, political,
okay.
The use of force, instead of having one locus.
No. So if one was going to look in the dictionary or see what the root of the word polar is, what it means, go back to Latin, wherever the hell that has to be tracked back
That'd be
to.
interesting.
Polar means points of political.
Well, in the geopolitical.
But again, I'm talking about the root. The root meaning, definition of it.
I'm going to look up polar.
Because it's easy to grab that word at polar and say, well, this is what it means.
In electrics, there's only two poles.
But, you know, which is great if you're talking to an assembly of electricians. They'll get what you're talking about exactly. So I'm just saying, there's probably a word that could be used
Indeed.
that could describe it better. And does it always have to be a political power?
The political science is used to define and refine and describe ideologies, and that's the normal thing we use. But in this case, in popularizing it, you're probably right. It's like I said, Americans especially are turned off by the very word ideology and political science. They don't want to hear it.
Well, I know you're a biblical scholar.
Oh, I know a lot about it.
Yeah, whatever. So what instruction is there in the Bible about people forming tribes or groups or governments?
There's not so much instruction as there is examples, and I believe it was probably the best is in the book that most people aren't familiar with, the books of Enoch, the book of the Sin of the Watchers, and then it's backed up by certain scriptures in the Old Testament where if you understand what was going on, man rebelled. Man was, after the Tower of Babel, he was divided up into nations, 70 nations originally, and the nations were given as many as were the number of the sons of God. It's talking about the heavenly host. There was princes put in charge of each nation, which were spiritual princes, and those became their gods, and then God reserved one for himself. He gave the 70 princes of the heavenly host their own nations. It says, okay, smart guys, see what you can do. Because we're talking about a struggle in heaven here between God and the heavenly host. You don't hear that talked about much in evangelical churches. But then he says, I'm going to make my own nation from this old guy here, Abram, and that's Israel. Israel's deserved to be God's nation. And Israel was given the proscriptions for how to form a culture, how to live in harmony with God's law, and that was to be the example and a light to the other nations. And we all know what happened. Not to get into that too much, but that's an example of different tribes. I mean, that was multipolarity because it's necessary because there's different, because the world's not perfect.
Multipolarity, again.
Oh, there I go again.
Thing. But it was also ordained by God.
Different cultures. It was ordained.
By him.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want some jackass in another country saying, well, you're going to have to do this because that's what I decide you guys need to do. Why can't we all...
It's not going to be in another country or another region. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm not understanding your question. I'm sorry.
No, it wasn't exactly a question. Because somebody somewhere are going to decide, well, we just want to be Eurasianists.
The principle of Eurasianism is to have your own local authorities. You have your own laws to defend against the others.
Excuse me. But what if I think I already am my own authority?
Then you don't need Eurasianism? Well, then you've got to face a globalist system, which is huge and powerful and has way the hell more money than you and way more PR and way more time on their hands, and you got to fight them by yourself. Local people that want to be autonomous need to organize and work together to defend themselves against the globalist ideology. That's why it's necessary.
If a small community, say like the one we're in currently, would start to make a few first steps towards something like that, what would you suggest they tackle first?
Wow. I've thought about this a lot right now, a lot, about where to start with something, and you got to have a big picture. The first thing you need to do is organize. You can't do anything without organization.
Okay, the big picture, you say you got to have a big picture.
You have to have a set of values that you're going to stick everything's going to adhere to those values. The Bill of Rights is a good set of values, but it could be maybe articulated in more modern language for a present situation. The right to defend yourself, the right to defend your property, that's nice. But having an AR-15 in your closet isn't going to cut it, because they've got indirect fire and aircraft and whole armies, and they can bring the whole world in on your head to enforce corporate policy or an ordinance. You have to organize. You have to get organized where you can actually defend yourself. You can't be self-sufficient except in a community, ironically enough. Being a Lone Ranger, you're just going to get squashed.
Right.
That's why I want to organize. The first step is to organize to defend your gains.
Since you've been in this ideal community a short time, have you held any meetings to get any people together and start to explain this to them?
Are we talking theoretical or what I've done here?
What you've actually done here on this trip back. Have you, I'm just asking. I haven't been here every minute, I don't know.
Well, I just got back and I'm broke and I got to go back to work. But I haven't put much thought into that. I'm trying to organize by working it out and putting in some sort of form that a literary form that can draw. I've tried to talk to everybody I meet around here. I try to talk to them about it, but the first thing is they watch television and they think I'm insane and they don't see any need for it. They are fine with globalism.
I'm gonna play their advocate. Just for a minute.
Are you trying to destroy me on my own video?
No.
I knew you were gonna be sharp, but holy crap.
But
this is
we
good.
went to school with many of these people. We had the same education. They're not all dumb.
No, some of them are quite clever.
So
what's the difference between us and them?
I don't watch TV.
I don't watch TV either. I think all of them do.
Well, you might be right. But we need to seek out the ones locally. Those are the ones we need to...
What have I done? I'm seeking out people locally that see this as I do, and I only found one.
But see, if I talk to somebody about this stuff, I'm not going to go, well, it's Eurasianism.
No, I don't do that either.
And I'm not going to mention multipolarity or bi-tri. I'm not going to mention those things. I'm going to keep it to something that is going to be familiar to them, especially if they watch TV and they whatever. It just, yeah. So I would focus it more towards a simpler language for that.
What I see is the average American that I see that knows what's going on and doesn't like this stuff, that doesn't want to be a servo for Klaus Schwab, except doesn't want to have their kids' DNA altered and be taught transvestite stories and whatever. The average person like that is a natural ally of people that he's been taught to fight. Scary, Dugin's scary, Eurasianism scary. But you can learn from them. There's a Russian method that I've learned for gardening.
You're saying Dugin is scary?
No, they're illuminated. If you look it up on Google, you see all kinds of crazy stuff, just like you see for anything else that the people in the media don't like.
See, again, I try to stay away from Google.
Well, how else are you going to find stuff?
I use others.
DuckDuckGo?
No.
I don't see any difference, really.
I don't use DuckDuckGo.
I've done some experiments, and I really don't see much difference at all. And Google isn't performing its stated function anymore, so except in very, very milquetoast cases. Some things that are innocuous, yeah, they'll lead you right to it, but they're trying to steer you off into right think. It's not serving its purpose of finding things anymore, so it's going to fall.
What corporation, large one, at this point in time, is doing what their originally stated function is?
Nature of a corporation is to be globalist and grab power.
So,
corporations are a problem.
pardon?
The corporation, the medium itself is a problem. They were saying that back when they first started having the corporations in the British Empire days. Some people recognize, some writers recognize that as a big problem. Like Blake in his poetry, Satanic Mills, the homogenization and everything, the taking the spirit out of everything is pure materialism. It's what a corporation's going to do, because corporations look at things only through what's profitable, nothing
Right,
else.
right.
Nothing else matters. Nothing.
Exactly.
You have to respect traditions and dignity and spirit, like indigenous cultures mostly do.
Right.
But corporations don't respect that, and neither does neither do the globalist.
So what do you think the chances are that more people could become interested in learning about it, even just locally? Do we have to have a float and a parade to bring attention to it and throw out candy to the kids?
Well, that went over all the stupid people, maybe. I don't want stupid people. I want quality people. You say I was going to stay in this area, which I probably could after I get a little operating capital. This is my hometown. Maybe I should. If I was going to come here and work from here, what would I do? You give me 15 people of significantly above average intelligence who are dedicated and who don't watch freaking television and don't care about being entertained, who are dedicated to doing something here, I'd take over this whole freaking place. I guarantee you. I don't think it'd take 15 around here. 10 maybe. Quality people.
You
think
on the high end 15, on the low end 10, people could take over this town? Isn't that kind of scary?
County.
County?
I'm not talking about militarily. I'm talking about
I'm not
methodical.
I am not talking about, tanks rolling in kind of shit.
No, that get quashed real quick. You need a lot more than 15 for that.
You really think you could do it with that? In the county?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How would you do it?
It wouldn't be overnight either. You'd
get
have
that.
to infiltrate the government. You'd have to get your people in place in key positions. First, before you even start, you have to have goals, right?
Right.
What do we want to accomplish? I want people to be able to build their little estate within parameters what they want. You can make a little garden shed, you can put a big garden, you can put a garden in your front yard. Nobody should stop you, and they shouldn't say, oh, emergency power, somebody might get sick, you got to stay inside. You got to have an actual Bill of Rights against that stuff and defend it. On the lower level, the sheriff has all the power in a county. Sheriff has a way more power than you think he does. The sheriff, we need to get a sheriff that ignores the corporations and does his freaking job in taking care of the people according to the people's interests and not against the people's interests, because you're going to have, if this food shortage and all this stuff comes out like they say it will, I don't know if it will or not, it doesn't look good. But if you have people growing vegetables and wanting to have chickens in their backyard, which they did in the 30s to survive. There used to be chicken coop houses all over this town. When I was a kid, they're all gone now. They built them back during the Depression so people could have eggs and eat. You do that now, you can't.
Back then, the government was saying, have your victory garden, do all this. And what's ours now saying? Scream like a girl, throw your hands in the air.
Maybe they'll send the National Guard in and hand you a box of MREs,
No. We're going to get bugs.
Oh, yeah,
bugs. Dig them up and eat them.
It's corporate run, corporate profits.
Yeah.
It wasn't corporate run back then. They actually had some people who had to answer to local government who actually had the people's best interests at heart in their town. If you had chickens now, they'd come and stop you. They would have no problem. A lot of cops, that people want to lick their boots, but a lot of them are going to go into you and they're going to tell malnourished people who are starving, you can't have chickens here. You got to get rid of these. That's against the ordinances. And they will. They'll have no problem because they get paid for it and they'll sleep like a baby. That's what I think. That's kind of dark, but I've seen it.
Until enough hungry people get together and thump their heads.
You got to make it cost them something. But I don't see that. I see bootlicking and thank you for your service.
No, it's just not bad enough yet for some people. I mean, sometimes it's like, govern me harder. They're going to.
People have been conditioned. People didn't
And
put
I
up with
do
that.
realize that the sheriffs have a lot of power.
They don't
And
want you to know that.
and
Oh, I have to follow
they could have
orders. No, they
stopped
don't.
a lot of this shit from day one.
I could tell stories about this town right here, but I don't want to get people in trouble. People had businesses that they were told they had to close them down because Fauci says. And well, it's up to whether the police enforce it or not, isn't it? And sometimes they don't because they're good cops. There's very few of them,
also
though.
there are people who had realized that things were not the way. There were laws against what was being. They were breaking lots of laws.
That's
and
right.
they decided.
I'll look at the time on this. I can't see it. Wow.
Are we over?
No, I have no time limit. I just seen how long
there
it
were
was. It's
people
good.
who knew that it was wrong, and through filing legal things themselves, they were able to stay open.
It has been turned over a lot in some places and other places not.
No, they never closed.
Oh, they refused to close and they got by with it because they stood their ground.
Exactly.
That's what
They
needs to
knew
happen.
they knew what their rights were, and they knew how the laws limited.
It's easier to stand your ground. It's easier for people to stand their ground if they organize. And
But
how
they didn't organize.
No, they didn't. And
But
not only
some people did manage to do it.
hats off to them. It would have been easier if they organized, and easier for more people to do it if they organized. Need to organize before it's coming back. You know they're going to do it again. It's a
Yep.
nice tool.
Yep.
And it's a tool that becomes permanent. I mean, it's a tool to achieve their political goals, economic goals, to shut down the small businesses, buy them for pennies on the dollar. They let Walmart stay open, didn't they,
Right.
and McDonald's, but you're going to make people sick if you stay open. People don't see that. It's a tool, but then the tool is etched into the permanent policy. And that's what's really
Well,
bad.
the
They
tool
want us to
becomes
live
a
like
weapon that's used against you,
it.
even worse.
It's folded into society where you got to get used to this happening all the time. We're going to go in cycles whenever we want to shut things down. Well, we're coming up with the November elections virus pretty soon, I think.
right.
I mean, yeah, we know this, but the vast majority, there's just too many people that they watch TV is what I see is the main problem. They watch freaking TV.
I would agree.
That's why they believe it.
If they would even just not do it for a month and then turn it back on, I think they might be surprised at how
Yeah.
ridiculous
It's hypnotism.
some
It's
of
an
that
addiction.
shit is.
I haven't watched it since like the early 80s. I see it once in a while when I visit somebody that has it on. And I try not to be rude and insulting because they're people that I love and respect that have the TV on it, but I have to tell them, how can you stand to sit here and watch this shit? What's wrong with you? How can you even stand it? I want to throw a brick through it in 2 minutes. It's awful. They think you're stupid.
And it does
They think you're a stupid
does
pervert.
nothing to improve your mind.
It degrades the mind. It
does
corrupts
nothing
it.
to improve your life. And
They spend all their time watching it.
I know, I
Oh, it doesn't affect me.
know, right? I know.
Remember Jaws when that movie came out? Mm-hmm. And people say, oh, it's just entertainment. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect. I know it's entertainment. And well, how come you don't go to the beach anymore? It's the same thing.
Right.
It does affect them. They don't admit it, or maybe they really don't know it, but they don't go to the beach because they're scared. It's a big scary thing with teeth going to come up out of nowhere and shake their leg off. Because they saw it, and they saw it in scary music. Look at the weather now. We watch the weather. They have the map. The weather map has big red blotches on it, and people are just dropping because it's 100 degrees. It was 100 degrees back in the early 80s when I lived here. It was like 105 every freaking day, and it was humid. You didn't hear anything about it. It was just hot, you know.
It was just hot.
And you're
And they-
decastling corn and you're walking beans.
Yeah, and they didn't have red, like hell blotches.
You remember
on
Mr. Rogers? He's
Mr.
the weatherman. Well, on TV when I was a kid. I watched the weather on TV. I quit watching in the 80s, so Mr. Rogers was this kindly old man. He had a big white screen, and he's like a professor, and he used to tell you what's happening with the weather. Now it's drama.
Oh,
fear,
yeah,
scary,
yeah.
special effects. People are dropping. Interest story. Look, this UPS guy dropped. I saw that on the news at my friend's house. The guy staggers around on a porch. You know, they make stuff up. They script stuff.
Right.
It's not real. It might be, but I doubt it. They caught him locally here back several years ago. Somebody filmed them behind the news studio. They had police tape up and cop cars parked over, and they were filming a crime scene behind the news studio. They do that crap all the
Locally?
time. Locals do it.
No.
Yes. They do special interest, human interest stories. If you've got any training in film school, filmmaking, I hung out with some people that used to work in Hollywood, and I learned a lot. And you can see the stuff, the way they've put it together. You know, and the stuff they're feeding you from Ukraine's the same way. That's a big. They're doing
but again,
reality shows.
You know, I have nothing because I don't watch that shit.
I see too much accident. I don't want to,
you know,
but I see enough to see that.
I almost have no idea what people here are getting force fed because I don't watch it. I watch the things you recommend. I watch things that I happen
Oh,
to.
I brainwashed you, have I?
Well, not really. Sorry, and I watch things that other people recommend. But again, it's kind of, you just know everything that they come up with. As long as CNN is going to run something, it's bullshit. It's propaganda.
I learned that lesson in when was that, late 80s, I think. I was part of a group that we became a news story in Houston. We were at a motorcycle run north of Waco back while the Branch Davidian thing was going on. I don't remember exactly when that was, late 80s maybe. Anyway, that's not important. We were there during the Branch Davidian standoff. There were journalists from all over the world crawling over that area, waiting for something to happen, and they waited and waited and waited. And we had a motorcycle run north of there, so a bunch of them came up just to kill time and do some human interest stories. They interviewed us because I was riding with motorcycle evangelists comprised of, you know, former outlaws. I mean, not Outlaws MC. Well, there were some of them too, but they were outlaw clubs. People got out of the lifestyle. They had a religious epiphany. They were serving Christ and going back into the outlaw community because they were evangelicals. I was with them. I learned a lot. But the media came up and several of them interviewed us and did a little show on us. Went back to Houston to watch it, and we were appalled. They twisted everything we said. They sexed it up and made us out to be a bunch of, you know, sleazebag human traffickers or something. It was just amazing. And they can do that, and they do it. They sex things up. They look at marketing on the internet. They do it too. They want clicks, and so they throw a bunch of key issues in there that'll get more views. It has nothing to do with the truth. They make up stories, and I'm sure that the owners of the media get orders to push certain things like global warming right now.
Right.
Change. Murray says you got to change the maps. You got to put lots more red on them.
Right,
you know? Yeah.
right.
Our marketing guy said that.
You got to scare people because you have to put that into their head.
Mm-hmm.
Put it in their subconscious. Let it build. Let it build.
Every little thing they're doing this. All this.
Yep.
Deep psychological marketing research and neuro-linguistic research has gone into changing people through that little box, and people sit there with their mouth open and their eyes closed and just let them shovel whatever they want into their mind.
Yep.
And in the minds of their children. And you tell people that and they agree with you, and then they tell you, well, it doesn't affect me very much. I'm going to slap their face till it's hot.
We just need the schools to open back up. Oh no!
It's the same thing.
Hell, exactly.
They were doing it when we were in school. How many times did they roll the television out into the classroom?
Oh yeah,
and
all
turn
the
it on?
time.
To watch a special educational program.
Wait. Even better was when they first walked on the moon.
Oh yeah.
And I was in private school. And that time then, and that was a big deal, they actually wheeled a TV in so we could watch the
You could watch
the moon
movie.
Exactly.
Dick Nixon talking to him in real time on the phone from the White House.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just a beautiful, beautiful
And my
moment.
cell phone won't work here.
I know, right? Right? But back then, all things were possible because we were golden then.
Technology.
Well, we've lost so much of the technology that we had in the 60s.
We can't get it back.
Yeah.
And they accidentally erased all the telemetry, so you can't check it.
Exact. And all the movie that they, nope, don't have any of those. Accidentally destroyed. But, you
And
know.
yet people actually, more than believe, they're enthusiastic about it. I mean, enthusiastic.
Well, I mean, in one of the local groups, I checked this morning, and somebody had posted something about man's first walk on the moon or whatever. And within the comments within there, so many, I remember seeing that when I was a little girl at school. I've been a NASA nerd since then. Well, why don't you
change point in my life.
Why don't you just put "I'm stupid" on your forehead? I mean, really. But I
That movie
digress.
has made so much money. It's box office buster. I mean, what is it, 17 million a day ever since then?
That they? Oh no,
That's
I
what
think
they
it's
get now.
more. I think it's like 50 million.
Well, they have to do touch up and sequels.
I mean, they
and
just
stuff, but
keep
they just-
raking it in, and then the Webb telescope? Is it the Webb telescope?
Hubble.
No, Webb.
I don't know anything about
Hubble is the thing that whatever, but Webb has showed us marvels never seen before, except on people's countertops and backdrops of 80s school photos and shit like that.
Alert! We're getting way off subject.
Doesn't
Are we
matter.
done here?
We're done. I think we're
I
done.
think we're done with Eurasianism
for today.
for today. And well, it's been delightful for me. I think it's a good video. I'll put it in the can after I look at it. And it's been great. Uncle Billy's signing out. I hope we can do this again. Maybe we could do it on the telephone or WhatsApp or something sometime.
Or something.
Uncle Billy signing out. Say goodbye.
Bye.